Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to mybigfootsighting.com.
My Bigfoot sightings began in June of 2022. I took a somewhat unconventional path from what I have learned from others, listening to Sasquatch encounters and experiences where there's a number of people who just happened across the Sasquatch out in the wild or driving, hunting. I personally started listening to Sasquatch experiences driving back and forth. I still do, but at the time I was filming at racetracks, and I would just listen for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. No, usually just 3 hours each way. And I became completely infatuated with this subject. Eventually I had this pull. I had to get out into the forest and have a look and just see if I could find something. Something that may have been Sasquatch, broken tree, footprints, anything like that. Anything that I felt might have possibly been done by Sasquatch or Bigfoot from what I understood. That was in the fall of 2021 when I began listening. And come spring of 2022, I was also in a pretty low financial spot. And my job consisted of driving all around, filming at racetracks all over the country, mostly the east side, up to Wisconsin, down to Florida, over to Texas, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan. And so I decided that the best way for me to be able to keep doing this was camping. So I set out, I drove over to Walmart and got a tent and what I thought I needed to camp, and I headed out. And the first place that I camped was in Arkansas, northwest Arkansas in the Ozarks. Now, some of my thinking involved here at this time, after having listened to so much Sasquatch podcasts and everything else, I decided I really wanted to go somewhere where I thought they could possibly be somewhere a bit remote. And I ended up in a campground where there was no cell signal. And I just thought, hey, you never know. I'd been listening to a channel a lot of people have heard of called How to Hunt. And I feel like there's quite a bit of knowledge shared there. And I think I picked up quite a bit from that, a sense about the subject in general. Not that you ever fully understand it. It's more, I always have more questions than answers. But so I went to this campground, and long story short, this is not even June of 22. It was like April or May. But I'll always remember something woke me up about 1 a.m, got up on the picnic table, had a cigarette. Well, I first went to the bathroom, and there was just footsteps that went right across behind me. And this is my first night camping by myself, but camping at all, in probably 20 years. So to say that I was nervous would be an extreme understatement. I was completely frozen. I didn't know what to think that it was, and I just was terrified. I do know that it sounded bipedal, and it took me a little while to think that maybe that was possibly a Sasquatch, and it just seems kind of odd that something would happen my first night camping but that is just what happened. So fast forward, I did a little more camping, and I stayed in Oklahoma for a little bit, Missouri, and then I settled at another place in the Midwest. I don't really talk about that area because it's where I'm at, sort of like camper safety and all that stuff. And I'm one of those people that with Sasquatch experiences, I like to keep it off the radar as much as possible. So I met up with a group I had been joining Facebook groups of the different states I was visiting, and I saw that there was a camp out in one of them coming up, and I went and hung out with them, and that was a great time. I had a fun time. They went out at night, and we did a little hike and stuff. Then eventually I went to another spot in that state, and I started talking in the Facebook group, and some people recommended a specific area to go camping. And they seemed certain that this was a Sasquatch hotbed, so to speak. I had people giving really explicit, specific examples of what they had experienced for years. What I understand about the subject now, that is not the most common thing, but it does exist. I've definitely heard of other groups that go out in different spots. You could say enthusiasts of a sort, researchers. And so eventually I went to this camping area, and that was the night that my life changed. Once again, the first night camping there, I suddenly heard a tree crash. At least that's what I thought it was then. Having heard that a few more times and also finding some of the broken parts of trees or actual trees that fell over, I believe that that was possibly a big limb. But what really woke me up or changed my life, as I would call it, is the second one that I heard about 15 minutes later, which I actually recorded. After the first one, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to just hit record on my camera and who knows, right? See if anything else happens. And sure enough, 15 or so minutes later, a second big break, big crash. And in my mind, that was the moment where I knew that was Sasquatch. It was completely calm, which I also documented on film. And I'll just never forget that moment. And I know for a lot of people, this is the last thing people want to go out and seek. Many, many people out there I've heard talk about this, had an experience, and they would not mind at all if they never see one again. Some people give up hunting. I personally just was very, very interested. I found this absolutely fascinating. And the group of people who I ended up meeting, speaking with, listening to their experiences were not totally terrifying. There is always, I think, a little bit of a terrifying element with this. But over years for them, and they're far from alone, there's numerous other groups that I know of that do the same types of things. They will just go out and have a campfire somewhere, maybe a camp out, maybe just park somewhere in the forest, and they'll just hang out. And their understanding through years of experience is sometimes the Sasquatch come and check them out. And sometimes they know that the Sasquatch showed up through various sounds, typically. Sometimes people see movement out in the forest, a shadow. But the bottom line is it was an established thing. And that was sort of my introduction to the subject at a more intimate level. And the area that I was in had been frequented by a woman for a number of years. And she had basically cultivated what she would consider a relationship with, as she would call it, the clan. So in the interim, I am at this camping spot night after night after night. And to be honest, I can't even remember all that has happened because a lot has happened over a couple of years. That was 22. It's now 24. But here and there, certainly not every night, but here and there, there's a certain sound that comes out that informs me that that's not a deer or a squirrel. And because of the amount of reports in the area, all the people that I've met who've had actual experiences, it's sort of an established thing. And so I realize now this is a bit of a unique situation overall with the sentiment that the people that I have met have towards the Sasquatch. And on top of that, as I began on what I consider a good start with this, in the sense that it was overall positive, when I heard the 3 tree crashes, I don't know why I did not think I was being scared out of the woods. I wasn't sure what it meant, but it didn't feel like an aggressive maneuver to terrify me. And believe me, my heart was pounding, but I was also thrilled. I just couldn't believe that the Sasquatch are real. I had been working up to it. Some people might relate to this, where someone who maybe hasn't gone out and looked for them, maybe can't, but they've listened enough online to sincere storytelling, well, not storytelling, actual experiences from honest people. Eventually, your BS meter doesn't go off, and eventually you know that they are telling the truth, and this sounds like it's a very legitimate thing. Not too long into having been at this spot, it was introduced to me if I wanted to try gifting. I hadn't really looked into this too much. I hadn't heard too much about it, and I had heard quite an extensive amount from the person who had been in the general area doing this for a number of years. Through speaking with her, I decided that sounds like a good idea, and it's something that I still do a couple years later. I know a lot of people warn against that. I started hearing about that after I had been doing it for probably a year, sometimes more than once a day, and in spite of going periods of time without doing it and all that, it's been a completely positive experience. I could go in depth about that, just the plethora of a variety of ways that I would find offerings that I put out. It's quite astonishing. You could rule out small vermin and deer and coyotes rather quickly from the way that things that I had set out were left. And on top of that, I documented that whole thing with, she's a library of, 75 videos. Sort of a little diary of sorts. It's something that I've only dabbled with a little bit in public because I do have a YouTube channel. It's called Camping with Sasquatch. And if you are believing what I'm saying here, then you can see that the name kind of made sense. As far as actual sightings, a crystal clear daylight sighting is something that I have yet to experience, and I look forward to it. One day while I was sitting at my campsite, I'm looking out, and without my glasses, just far enough where it's fuzzy, I could see the proportions, the correct color of what I would consider a Sasquatch standing up next to a tree. So looking at that, I'm kind of moving back and forth, and I'm sort of, wow. Now, this might be hard to explain or understand, but this is a little while into having accepted this reality and had many very terrifying nights. But it was a pretty calm experience. And I wasn't sure. I knew that it looked like about the right dimensions, went and got my glasses, sat back down, and now there's nothing there. I'm moving back and forth to see, was there a shadow? Nothing. Later on, as I'm speaking with the woman who had gone before me in the same area, who I'd later considered to be a mentor, I asked her about a sighting that her daughter had had at one time. And that was when she came to visit once, because it was the same area. So one time she came to visit, and actually with her daughter. And where they pointed was exactly where I saw that. So I found that pretty interesting. It was from off in a distance, I'd say 7, 8 feet tall, roughly. standing perhaps a little bit sideways, so I wasn't seeing like the really wide shoulders you hear about and stuff like that. Perhaps it was dark. It was later in the day. Still full sunlight, but later in the day. So I didn't get a real crystal clear color, but I'd say there could have been some gray. Wasn't jet black, dark with possible gray. There are a couple other sightings that I've had. One is a possible, one was definite, and then another couple are, if you consider them a sighting, I saw literally glowing eyes in the dark with nothing to reflect light, literally self-illuminating bioluminescent eyes. The very first possible sighting that I had is a hindsight retrospect from over 20 years ago, base of a mountain in New Hampshire, when Sasquatch wasn't even on my mind. It was out of the periphery of my vision. I saw something duck when I turned the lights on in the car. And years later, I sort of, off of memory, kind of estimated the height, and that had to be about 10 feet up. And just through logical deduction, I can't really think of anything else that would shadow us right into front of my car, because we had walked a little ways to my car. The sun was down because we were late coming back from the mountain. And so that's a possible sighting. Girlfriend at the time wanted nothing to, she freaked. I was curious, like, what the heck, what was that? And she was just losing it and telling me, go, 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 go. And once we got on the road, I don't want to talk about it, which I don't understand, but we had like a 3-hour drive home, so I didn't want to have a horrible drive home, so I just left it alone. The other sightings, one was I saw a small, dark figure crawl pretty close, right past me, right near my tent. I could hear it. It was 15 feet away, maybe. And once again, there was glowing coming from up front, like it had this sort of dim spotlight on its head. And by that point, I had already seen the glowing eyes, so I knew what it was. One other time, almost the exact same spot, maybe it was the same one. I'm pretty sure one crawled on the other side. That was interesting. It was very dark, so it was mostly just a shadowy figure, so it was hard to make out any details. But I think that is the only being that would have glowing eyes as it moves along. And I know a lot of people listening probably may not even believe that their eyes glow. That's cool. On that topic, those are two other sightings. I mean, if you would count each set of eyes as one, there was one night where I saw a set of eyes glowing. At first, I saw what looked like two very light, somewhat dim, emerald green, looked like two glow bugs, like behind a bush, probably 100 feet away. This was about at the height that I was as I was sitting, because it goes down on a ridge right there where that was. At that time, off of memory, I don't recall if I knew that their eyes lit up. But what I do know is I'm looking, and they're the right proportions. I'm still kind of thinking glow bugs, even though they're not blinking. So I move my head to the right, and those two glowing objects followed me and moved to their left, like mirroring what I was doing. And once again, that was quite a calm, because I just, in the moment, wasn't thinking, whoa, is that a Sasquatch that I'm looking at? It was just kind of calm. And then in hindsight, and actually telling someone I know had the exact same experience in the same spot, which is pretty trippy. Another time, I was with Greg Yost, aka Squatchman, and I believe it was two other people. And I'd heard a lot about him, and one of the experiences that many, many people report associated with going out with Greg Yost is glowing eyes. So we were at a camp out, and I saw that he was down the way, like kind of away from the big group around the bonfire, and I wanted to go see what's up down there, because I'd heard a lot about him. So we were all sitting in front of a fire. It's kind of going out. And I don't know who pointed it out first, probably Greg. But somebody said, look at that. And in front of us was 3 or 4 sets of glowing eyes. All of them just peeking around a tree. You can only see, for most of the time, only one. But they were just right there, probably 50, 100 feet away. They weren't all in the same spot. One was up high, one was low. That was pretty amazing, because we sat there, we were all talking about what we're seeing. Do you see that? Yeah. Do you see that? Do you see that one right there? Yeah. Oh my God. Wow. And Greg Yost is saying, thank you. He has like a kinship with a Sasquatch clan. He has names for them. You can look him up on YouTube. There's a number of his videos. Really interesting to listen to. And I absolutely had an experience with him of glowing eyes. On the topic of sightings, there's another one where I started hearing cracks from a tree and turned around with my camera and just filmed in the middle of the afternoon. And just after I started filming, a big branch just breaks and falls down. And I just sat there with my camera facing that direction. And if that wasn't interesting enough, the other part that I find really interesting is after everything has completely stopped, suddenly something moves right at the end. And when you zoom in, it's interesting. I look at that as maybe I saw something there. Numerous friends have looked at that, and it's not a crystal clear visual, but most agree there's something there. And so out of life circumstances, finances, financial stuff I'm dealing with, camping is still the only viable means for me to stay somewhere. Actually, things have they even went worse for a while before. I don't know if they're quite getting better yet, but bottom line is I still camp full-time in a tent. And so for experiences that I have had camping, there's a lot. I know it's a lot for anyone to wrap their mind around. Some people will say I've gone out and hunted for 40, 50 years and I have never seen anything. Another will say I hunted for 30 years and saw one. And that anyone claiming that they have multiple experiences is full of it. I am grateful that I actually came into this whole thing as a full-time YouTuber, having been doing the car stuff. And as I was heading out, because of the financial situation I referred to earlier, it was worse in 2022. And so I decided I can't go to racetracks like 5 days a week as I was in the past. And so in my mind at the time, I was thinking I will just do racing a couple days, maybe camping, van life, Bigfoot. Basically just what I'm doing, make videos about what I'm doing during the week and the racing. Maybe get into some other topics with YouTube. And so because of that, while was in the places that I've mentioned, not the locations, but in the forest I'm referring to, I did quite a bit of filming and recording I started to do. And I have ended up with quite a bit of recordings, even some interesting video stuff. And the reason I bring that up is referring to the idea of it's a complete anomaly for someone to have like more than one experience in their lifetime. And I have on more than one occasion actually recorded certain things that are odd, considering some of the places that they happened. I think I know what it was, but I've also learned to just leave it at that it's hard to come out and say, I absolutely know that this was a Sasquatch, that was a Sasquatch. And I also observe how people come down on people that make claims like that. I'm more interested in just sharing with people, sharing experiences, learning from each other rather than debating but as I suppose I've started with a pretty warm and fuzzy introduction or beginning, and it definitely wasn't all warm and fuzzy. As I've listened to experiences shared, I've learned of the physical proportions of, you could say, the average Sasquatch and other aspects that they possess. You could probably use the term it's inhuman. The strength, the speed, the size, the presence. Just the presence alone seems to have a massive impact on people, just a visual. And I can attest to, it seems when they're present, there's like an electricity in the air. Your skin, the hair stands up on your skin, you get goosebumps. It's very tangible. I don't understand it, but just about everyone I speak with knows that to some extent, or at least a lot of people. And that's definitely my experience. And so there have been quite a few things that they've been scary. It's almost as if there's a progression to it, like an intelligence behind it, like somebody testing the waters. I've heard people speculate things like they see how you'll react. They test your fear level type of thing. I don't know. Maybe that's what they do. Maybe it isn't. It makes sense, but so much of it's conjecture. But I find myself reaching for explanations like that when I think of what I've experienced. One of the things that I have now experienced many times is footsteps. It reminds me of that first night camping in Arkansas, because now in hindsight, I think about those gradual, methodical, slow, bipedal sounding footsteps, and I now struggle to come up with another explanation. But there are some experiences with footsteps that, like the first couple tree crashes I heard in June 2022, that I will never forget. One night, I'm just sitting by the fire, and at this point, I had gotten used to having heard footsteps, even to the point where it might sound weird, but I kind of enjoyed hearing it. It was just kind of amazing. I've started to feel a bit less afraid. People would kind of ram it into my head, hey, listen, if they wanted to take you out, they could have taken you out so easily. And the fact that I would wake up day after day, kind of a strange way to go about it, but I came to feel that has some validity to it. But even though I became a little bit accustomed, and that's not to say it isn't a really exciting thing to me when I hear it. It's just that I'd heard it quite a bit. But there was one night where the fire's getting a little bit dim, just about out, and I'm kind of thinking of going to bed. And all of a sudden, these steady, not really fast, but steady footsteps just walk right up and stop just outside the light. And I thought my heart was going to beat out of my chest. At this time, I had been there for a little bit, and I had certainly put quite a bit of thought into Sasquatch, wondering about them. And so I have no idea what's happening. Somebody just walked right up, and I'm very scared. And so I just said, hey, maybe you like fire. I'll add a little wood to the fire. Maybe you'd like that. Hopefully you like fire. I didn't know what else to do. I figured I'll just say something, because that's how I responded to that. I mean, I was so terrified. When you're out there alone, there's levels of fear that just come up. Not even like that they're provoked from something, but just something about the dark. And something like that can just set you through the roof, at least me. Because I wasn't experiencing things that led me to believe that someone is out here trying to get me or kill me. But when you suddenly get footsteps that just walk right directly at you, it's hard to describe the fear that shoots up from that in my experience. And then it's experiences like that that make me question and look to try to understand who I'm living amongst. And on the coattails of that story, there's another one where it's sort of amped up a little bit even more on another occasion where there's another sound that I started to hear. On occasion, it almost reminded me like somebody was tapping drumsticks together, kind of a bit like a rock clock, but I could hear it moving, and I knew that it was something somebody was doing as they're moving. I don't know if it could be vocal. I actually had an experience later where I do think it was a vocal sound, but it was sort of like just a few in a row like that. And I, at the time, kind of figured that was probably, I don't know what else would make that sound. It would just sort of be a little ways out, moving sideways, like I'd hear a couple of them, then here and there. And then there was this one night where I started hearing that sound accompanied with footsteps walking once again directly at me. And then just once again stops. This one wasn't as close. It was from a different direction than the first footsteps that I described. But man, talk about an adrenaline rush. Part of you doesn't have a clue what's doing that. And there's just something about the dark and suddenly hearing sounds like that it just hits different. But as I spent days and weeks and months camping, for me, it's clear that there's intelligence behind this stuff and even thoughtfulness. On occasion, you'll hear sounds that they don't sound like natural sounds coming out of the forest, like a lot of people describe a wood knock. And it's not a sound that I personally, when I'm just sitting at my camp, hear a lot, but I have heard it. And there are occasions where I might hear that sound come from when a car's driving by. And I wonder, is that some sort of a communication? And then there's another aspect, which is vocals. That is something that I'm very intrigued by, and I hope to hear. I've done a lot of recordings, but then I've put a lot of thought into the vocal aspect. Because you have your typical sounds, whoops, howls, mouth pops, clicks. And over time, I've just pondered between hearing from, I don't know how many times that they imitate things, and just it makes sense that they would to stay clandestine with their communications. And that's just pure conjecture on my part from sitting out there and listening. But then sometimes you'll hear stuff that just seems a little bit odd. And yes, I wonder, did a Sasquatch do that? And then I'm a thinker, and I wonder, what's that about? There was one night where I'm just sitting out there. I think it was probably 10 o'clock. And absolutely nobody around. Where you can tell if they're a car or anything. And this really deep voice just starts booming out. And it's hard to describe. There's a similarity to the well-known recording called Ohio Howls, the Ohio Howler, by Matt Moneymaker of the BFRO. But to hear that in person was pretty mind-blowing. It went on for a little bit, off and on, and then I recorded all night, and I heard a few more sounds. And anyone that's heard that come out of the woods, It's just something, it's hard to describe. I know for me, I'm sitting out there having experiences. On one hand, I'm convinced, okay, a Sasquatch did that. It had to be. And on another hand, I'm still like, really though? It's still a lot to wrap the mind around. It's still a bit hard to believe at times, as strange as that may seem, a bit of a contradiction or paradox. But when you hear a sound like that, there's not a lot of sounds that I've heard where I would venture to say I absolutely think that was a Sasquatch, but that was one of them. And of course, it's a combination of things I've experienced, others have experienced that I personally know, the same area, not really just jumping to quick conclusions. Another sound along that line where I am certain in my mind that it was a Sasquatch was one occasion of a few where I heard footsteps walking directly at me again, and then I can only describe what sounded like crawling as they were closer. And on one night, I just heard one short breath, like an exhale that sounded like a bull right in front of me. That was interesting. That was another one of those, I have no explanation for that one besides that. There's no bears or anything around where I'm at. At least they say, but I mean, I've never seen a bear track anywhere around it. I explore a lot. Found plenty in like Ocala down in Florida and stuff, but yeah, the occasional big breath of air, you can just hear the lungs. And then having it right in front of you, it's just hard to explain. It was pitch black. The pitch black is something I've gotten accustomed to. I've gotten more comfortable out there over time. To be honest, I used to have the place very well lit up. I'd always have a fire going. And probably every other trip to Walmart, I bought a new solar light, and eventually I had like 15 in a circle around me. And candles lit. And I'm not judging anyone for doing that. I completely get it. For some reason, I kind of like the dark, which took a while. But there's also a whole bunch of experiences I've heard where you could gather that the Sasquatch are not big fans of bright lights or too much light. I could even tell one story where someone was actually basically told that from one, as far as they can tell. It's a long story, but I don't think it's new news for some people that there might be an aversion to bright lights at night. And so I've gotten comfortable with just no lights. And there's always something about that is, I'm not even sure what the right word is, but it's always something. Being in the pitch black definitely heightens senses, and it's just an atmosphere in itself. And something that brings me comfort, I would say, stems from a lot from the woman who I followed in her shoes. She was actually mentored by Barb Shoop of Squatching with Barb and Goldie, used to be Squatching with Barb and Gabby. I've actually interviewed Barb on my YouTube channel, Camping with Sasquatch. She's wonderful. And if you watch Barb, you'll also see a benevolent sentiment towards the Sasquatch, along with the woman I consider my mentor. And there's numerous others. And that adds to me feeling more comfortable in the dark. I can only describe what I've experienced as a benevolent nature. And believe me, I have no doubt at what they're capable of, between scaring the pants off people and everything in between. I can't speak for everyone out there. There's always people that say there's bad ones out there and everything else. They're aliens, they're demons, they're evil. And I can only speak on my experience in the places I've been at. Have not sensed that. And because of that, and what I love to do, and also what I do with YouTube, is I occasionally now will travel to other areas that are known to be active areas. And I'll go out there, I'll camp for a day or two, typically do a little hike, record overnight. And thus far, it's been great. I do it at campgrounds. I'm not let's draw it out in the middle of the wilderness, totally primitive. But I personally, I've had good experiences and I enjoy it. And so even when I'm not at the same exact spot, it's pretty much always at another spot where I either look on the Bigfoot mapping project and I see there's a bunch of reports, or I've heard about. I can't tell you how many hours of How to Hunt, Sasquatch Chronicles, My Bigfoot Sighting I've listened to, and many, many others. I love listening, and you hear locations talked about, and that's typically where I go if I head out and camp somewhere else. I'm not going to say that I get visited by Sasquatch everywhere I go. I don't know. I have more questions than answers. There's been some nights where I wondered if maybe I heard some interesting stuff. I typically record, and I'll put up recordings that I thought were interesting. I can't say what they definitely were or not, but it makes you wonder. Something else that came across my radar is there's a private property owner who suspected possible Sasquatch activity. And I ended up staying there pretty regularly, and that's been pretty cool. One of the things that I found most interesting was some gifts that I would set out were treated exactly the same as another location quite a ways away. Very, very specific details. One of them is like little treat boxes, little pies like you get at Walmart, and they'll be neatly opened in a specific way, exactly the same way, and that just has me scratching my head. But yeah, there are so many details, so many different rabbit holes of thought I could go down about this. So many different little stories of experiences. I feel there's a lot of possible experiences where I'm not sure. So I mainly like to, for the most part, talk about more tangible stuff. Like recently, right across from my campsite, if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll hear it. There was a massive tree that fell right across from me. It woke me up. It was completely calm. I went and looked at the tree. It was dying. It broke probably 30 feet up, just snapped. You can hear it crack twice and then fall. So you could put in an argument that it just fell. I definitely found it interesting that it was directly across from me of all the places in the forest. But that particular sound of falling trees, I don't know how many people feel this way, but I actually like hearing that. I've recorded quite a few under very interesting circumstances where I wonder if they were pushed over. I have heard people recommend speaking to them. And that is something that I did from the very beginning. Being really interested in the subject before I'd even gone out once. I'd heard some pretty interesting stuff. One that stands out is a man by the moniker Owlman, who has written into How to Hunt, and I think also the Bigfoot Project. And he typically rifles off a bunch of suggestions, and he really goes down the rabbit hole. Look him up if you're interested in going down the rabbit hole and hearing from someone that claims to know about the Sasquatch. I know some people will laugh at that. So he had these suggestions, and I took them to heart. They just resonated. And I began speaking in the words that he suggested from the very beginning, and often ending with a prayer to them. And for anyone interested, I will tell you what it is, because some people out there might be interested in hearing that and maybe even trying it themselves. But the prayer he suggested was blessings to you from the great Creator. And I know that's not for everybody. Some people are going to think I'm nuts for just everything. And some people out there have Sasquatch on their property, or like me, might actually want to have an experience, which Steve Istall adamantly says he doesn't. Anyone that knows would get that one. And it doesn't take too long, I don't think, if you're looking into this, to realize that it seems that they have a language and whatever else might go along with that. There's a lot of conjecture. Some say they have culture, that they travel in family units, grandparents, grandkids, elders, clan leaders. And that's where I had to make my own call, trust my gut. And for me, speaking out to the forest made sense. I've heard it over and over of various ways of people doing that. And I'm not even sure I want to use the word having success, but it made a difference. A lot of them are people who were not happy or scared with a clear presence that had been shown to them around their property. And eventually they'd research, and somebody would suggest, speak, lay out some groundwork, like you're speaking to a neighbor in a way, but also communicating what's okay, what isn't okay, such as, please don't come and take all my vegetables, please don't kill my dog, and a whole plethora of things unique to each individual. I've heard that type of scenario many, many times, and I'm inclined to believe that that's a real thing. And so for anyone that has made it this far and is still listening, I do that. And something else that I do, having over a couple years interpreted a benevolent situation, I play music to the forest. And the logic behind that is kind of simple. One of my things with being interested in the subject and being out in their territory is the sort of give and take concept, where I'm thinking, I'd love to hear this, I'd love to hear that. What can I get? What can I get? What can you guys do for me? And so it's just sort of that, what can I do for you guys? Just something I could do for you. If you guys enjoy music, I'd like, and it's not here, let me give you this so I can get this. It's just an offering. Thinking of them from that way. And if there's a possibility that they actually like music, why not? Is anyone else playing them music? And for me, I'd much rather be on friendly terms if that's possible. The way I interpret it, it is. And something that I find is when I listen to different experiences of a plethora, and I've heard some I almost wish I hadn't, to like worse than a horror movie. But there's some real consistencies with people who, it's hard to categorize this, but like speak like a neighbor or a friend or even a family member. There's some real consistencies with people out there who have ongoing experiences. Whereas what I observe, it seems that those who research this kind of like they're searching for just an average animal, like a bear. It's just a complete mystery. And so I find that interesting how there seem to be these consistencies with those who look a little more into this. I hope to make it clear that it's just my observations, my speculation. They're a total mystery. I suspect that they could be around a lot. I don't know how much. But in my case, I'm not over here having direct back and forth communications or anything like that. I'm not trying to push the envelope with that. It's one of those things for one reason. It's like as soon as you escalate something, is it expected all the time? There's a bit of a comfort with just the slow. And it's still, for me, it's still a lot to wrap my mind around. And it takes a while, I think, for me to just even get used to this, I don't know what you'd call it, a new reality. I could go on and on about experiences, speculation, thoughts about Bigfoot. But what I can say, what I have experienced, is I have solo camped for a little over 2 years, and I'm still here. And if you knew where I was, boy, does it get dark here at night. It'd make you pucker. It is in a campground, so I'm not pretending to be way out in the woods, but it's just basically a very interesting area. I've heard a lot, and I'm still here. And I hope possibly that helps some people who are a little terrified. Believe me, I was quite nervous myself starting camping. And in my interpretation and my best understanding, I would say I'm in the camp who would consider them to be more similar to us than apes. My opinion is that they're very intelligent. I wonder if it's hard to draw a comparison between them and humans because of just a different upbringing, a completely wild upbringing with a great amount of intelligence, I believe. The message that I'd hope to leave with is for anyone out there who is interested in looking into this, like I was. I know there's a few out there, and there's plenty that are not really so interested. I hope that my experiences were helpful towards you, or the ones that I shared. I also hope that I made some sense. And if anyone is out there like me that is wondering about this, in the sense, for me personally, before I had any type of tangible experience where I felt that I personally knew that it was Sasquatch, I hope for you the absolute mind-blowing mystery, wonderful mystery. I hope that it's a positive experience. I know there's a lot of people where it isn't. I do think that in a number of instances where people were terrorized, and I'm not saying I wouldn't have been either, but just racking in my brain, I think possibly, like us, there's a sense of humor involved, even if it involves a roar, because I hear of people who say that they were attacked or chased. And from all that I can understand about the Sasquatch, attacking or chasing a human would be like us trying to attack a frog. It would be so easy. And where I'm going with that is, I don't really think that they were trying to attack. If there was any time where I don't even think attack could even exist, for the most part with them, you'd be dead. And so I don't think that's the case, and I don't claim to understand them, but I hope that anyone listening that might be in some sort of research of any level, I just hope that you have good experiences. And if anyone was to ask me for advice, I would suggest use the utmost respect. And one tool that I personally use quite a bit is various forms of prayer. I feel that helps, and I think that'll do it.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown, no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves and the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah, the sound of a memory brings me back to the bluegrass playing on my dad's 8-track. It's pick a man had been through it, getting through the day on Scruggs and Skags, booking A bales to those Tennessee jams. There's no other way that I'd do it. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards in double time, getting to the soul and the drumming, look Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Pace of the city life drives me wild. The only tune is the cars rushing by, with the bass on the stereos booming. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards in double time, getting to the soul and the drumming, look Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Something going backwards in double time, getting to the soul and the drumming, look Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm, ride chicken porch swing, mama's best sweet tea kind of sound.